Hi, and welcome to the video on Chapter 4, Joining Tables. This is Dr. Payne, and today we'll be covering just Part 1 of Chapter 4 on joining tables. So before we get into the different syntax and so forth, let's just talk about why joining tables is important. It's the whole purpose of a relational database. In a relational database, you have separate tables. Each one of those tables has data in common. So you have maybe a student table, and in the student table, each record would be a record for a student, which would contain the student's name, the last name, the first name, their street address, city, state, zip, email, that type of thing. But we want to take that information and we want to join it maybe with the classes that they're taking. So we have a different class table, and we would be able to go and we would be able to connect those two tables based on some sort of piece of data in common. Typically, this is your primary key and your foreign key. So let's take a look at this in our movie database. So hold on and let me switch over to SQL Developer. I'm in SQL Developer and I have our demo database for this class, and it's the movie database, which allows users to come in and check out movies, to pay for movies, to see if the customer is delinquent, to see if the movies are available. So within here, we have our member table, which we're not going to use, but we're going to use our movie table and our movie type table. So in our movie type table, and let me just come in here and look at the data, we can see that we have our movie categories. And then in our movie table, we have a category ID, which is a foreign key in here, and it's linked to our primary key in our movie type table. So in this case, they're named exactly the same, which they typically are. So what we're going to do is we're going to link these two tables, or we're going to join the tables so that we can list all of our movie titles by the movie category. And to do this, you're going to create a simple join or an inner join. And this inner join, there are many different ways to go about doing it. For this demonstration, we're just going to use a simple join using. So we have our select clause, which you guys are familiar with. In this case, because we are pulling from two tables, we have to identify which table we're pulling the column from. So in this case, we're going to pull the movie category from our movie type table, and we're going to pull the movie title from our movie table. So our select clause still has our columns in it. Then we have our from, we have one table, and we're going to join on our movie type table. So join is another keyword, which we'll talk about more. We're going to have a keyword using, and we're going to use the movie category ID to connect those two tables. And then we're going to sort them by our movie category. So if I come in here and I run this, we can see down here our results. We have our movie category comedy. We have three movies in there: drama, horror, sci-fi, all the way down through Western. So this is a really quick example, and we'll go into these in more details. But the whole purpose of having a relational database is to be able to go through and connect the tables. Typically, again, you connect the tables using your primary key and your foreign key. So let me go back into our presentation. So again, we're just going to go and we're going to do part one. And part one of chapter 4 uses an inner join. And an inner join is the least complicated of the joins. And it's going to return data, and it says here from a single table or multiple tables. But the whole purpose you use a join for is to return data from multiple tables. So that's our objective of this video. Again, we have joins. We have the simple joins. And for part one, we're going to cover join on. We're going to discuss how to use the where clause. I grew up with the where clause. I'm a where girl. I'm going to use that most of the time. We're going to join using the keyword using, and I'll show you how to create a natural join. In part two, we get to our outer joins. We also get to union, intersect, and minus. But just part one is on the inner joins. And here's a really nice graphic I got. I think I got this from W3 Schools. And the inner join will show you the data that you're going to go through and you're going to grab and you're going to display back to your user. You're going to either display it back in a report form or you're going to display it back into their GUI. So you can see in here where they intersect. So we're going to pull back the data that is common to table 1 and common to table 2. Where that data intersects is your inner join. And here it says returns all rows when there is at least one match in both tables. And let's go and let's look at the syntax for this. So the syntax for this is you have your select clause, you have your column names. You can have multiple column names, again, separated by a comma. And then you're always going to have your from clause. In this case, it's going to be from table 1. And you'll notice here I have a T1 next to it. This is my alias. So my alias means that instead of typing out the whole full name of the table, all I have to do is type out T1. Because now, remember with the movie example, I had to type in the full table name. You can use an alias within that select statement. It's only valid for that select statement. And instead of typing the full table name, in this case, I can just type T1 dot and the column name. In the syntax, anywhere you see these brackets, that means it's optional. In this case, and in best practice for SQL, you don't use the inner keyword at all. You would just use join. So from table 1, I would join table 2. T2 is my alias on my condition. These conditions are the same conditions that we saw in the where clause. You can use your relational operators, you can use your logical operators to have a compound condition. And you can join as many tables as you want to. In this case, we're joining 3 tables, and because we have 3 tables, we have 2 conditions. Your condition is always going to be one less than the number of tables that you're actually going through and joining. So let's see this as an example. So the example that we have here is we're going to select C.customer last name. C.customer last name is my fully qualified name. We're going to get customer last name from our customer table. As you can see down here in our from clause, we have customers with an alias of C. Then we're going to put in some static text, in this case a comma and a space, and we're going to concatenate that with our first name, and our synonym for that is name. That's what's going to show up in our report header. Then we have O.order_ID. O means it's going to come from my orders. That is the alias for orders. .id is a fully qualified name. And then we have order ID. And then we come to our from clause. From customer C, we're going to join our orders on O. We're going to join on where my customer ID from my customer tables equals my customer ID from my order table. So customer ID in my customer table is my primary key. Customer ID in my order table is my foreign key. But we're going to make sure that they equal. And then we're going to go and we're going to just order them by the customer last name. And there's a description down there below. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over into SQL and actually go through and run this so we can see this. So I'm back over in SQL Developer, and I just want to show you a couple of things. I want to show you that the quotes around your synonym for your column have to be dumb quotes. If you're going to copy these from Word or even some of the PowerPoint, they usually have smart quotes. You want to make sure that they're dumb quotes, that they both don't have that little dot at it with the apostrophe extended. So these are dumb quotes, which is great. And I'm going to go through and I'm just going to run this. So you can see that I ran this and it comes down and it gives me an error. And I'm going, well, what's this error for? Table view doesn't exist. Well, of course it exists. I use customer all the time. Then I look up and I see that I'm in the accounts payable schema. I should be in the order management schema. So I come over to my order management. I can use my SQL guy up here and go into order management, open up order management, and now I can go through and I can rerun it. These are some of the common mistakes that you're going to make as you go through and try out your SQL statements. So what I have here is I have my customer first name and last name, and I have their associated order ID. And this is a great report to go and to determine who's ordered what their order ID is, and to help you go through and maybe do some data trending of who's ordering what at what time. So we can see here that we have Samuel. Samuel has actually been busy and created 6 orders. We see here that Derek has only created 1 order, and we have the associated order ID with it. So again, joining tables allows you to grab data from multiple tables in your particular schema. You can also pull them from multiple schemas, but right now let's just stick with the simple ones. Again, I have my select clause, my from clause, which we all know about, my order clause, which we know about. So the only 2 things here are my join and my on. So I've showed you a simple join on. So now what I would like to do is I would like you to try it for yourself. I'd like you to pause the video, and I would like you to go into your SQL developer and create a report. A report is just the output that we're used to that will display all vendor contacts by vendor name sorted alphabetically. So you're going to use your accounts payable schema, your vendor table, and your vendor contacts table. You're going to look to see what they have in common, and you're going to join that tables on what they have in common. So go ahead and take a moment to do that, and then come back and we'll go through the solution. All right, so I hope that you came up with something similar to this, where you were to use the join and the on to create a report. So I'm going to select V from vendor name and VC I'm going to select vendor name for my vendors table and my last name for my vendor contact table. I'm using the alias V for vendors and VC for vendor contacts. I'm going to, in this case, it doesn't matter whether vendor contacts or vendors is the first, but I'm going to take it from vendors. I'm going to join my vendor contacts where my vendor ID is equal. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to sort them by my vendor name. So you should have received a list of all of your vendor contacts by vendor name. To double check that, you're going to go into your raw data and make sure that you have all your vendors covered and all your vendor contacts. So I've copied and pasted the SQL statement into SQL Developer, and I just want to run it real quick. And you can see that I have 8 vendor names and I have the associated last name. So let's go through and let's just see if we're anywhere near correct. So I'm going to come into my accounts payable tables. If I go into my vendor contacts and I go into my data, you can see that I only have 8, which is perfect because that's what I came up with here was 8. So you're not going to have any more last names than you do in your vendor contacts. So you can always go through on any SQL statement and verify your data in your result set or your report. That would allow you to go and you can always verify that in your result set by going back to the raw data. All right, so let's go through some of these a little bit quicker. So our next type of join is going to be using the where clause. We're familiar with the where clause because this is where we went through and we filtered in data or out data depending on how you think about it. But this is where we had our conditions, where we used our relational operators and our logical operators. So in this case, we're going to select columns, again, single or multiple, multiple are separated with a comma. From our tables, instead of using the join, what we're going to do is we're going to line up all of our tables and we're going to separate those by a column. So we have table 1, table 2, and table 3 with the aliases of T1, T2, T3. And then we have our where statement. Because we are in this syntax example, we are combining 3 tables or we're joining 3 tables, we're going to have 2 conditions. Our first condition is going to be from table 1 to table 2, and our second condition is going to be from table 2 to table 3. So an example of this would be going and selecting our customer last name and our first name by the order ID from customer C and orders, where my customer ID equals customer ID for my customers table and my orders table, and then we're going to order it by customer last name. We'll produce the exact same thing that we saw with a join on. So I'm sure your question now is when you should use where and when you should use join on. All of these are tools that you're going to have in your toolkit. You're going to become very, very comfortable with one versus the other. Best practices today have you using join instead of where. But I told you I grew up with a where, so you're going to see a lot of wheres in here. I'm really trying to do better with my joins. But they do the exact same thing. So right now, all I care about is that they make sense to you. You're going to be tested on each one of these, but go through and just start using them and playing with them. So if I go and I would run this SQL statement in SQL Developer, again, I would come up with the exact same result. So I'm back in SQL Developer. You can see our first one using join on, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to run just my second one. And you can see that I still have 47 rows. Let's come back and run the first one. I have 47 rows. This one ran in set 0.007 seconds, and this one ran in 0.006 seconds. In this case, it doesn't really matter. There's not a lot of efficiency gains from either one, but they produce the exact same result. So now what I want you to do is I want you to again pause the video. I want you to create a SQL statement using the where that will go and that will display all vendor contacts by vendor name. So it's the exact same scenario that you used joining on, but I want you to take that and I want you to make that a where statement. So go ahead and pause this. All right, so I'm glad that you're back. So you should have come up with the select clause. Instead of using the join on, you're going to use the where clause, where my vendor ID will equal my vendor ID from my vendor contacts table and my vendors table. It should again produce the exact same results that you had in your previous query. All right, so our next join. Our next join is using the keyword using. And this you can only do if the column names are the exact same in all your tables, or in both tables, I should say. So this is the syntax for using. So from here, if I can get my cursor working, we have a select, and then we again our column names from table, the alias, a comma, the second table, their alias, using, and then I just combined all of this into one join column name. Again, this column name has to be the same in table 1 and table 2. So an example of this is my select statement. I'm using the exact same thing that I have in all of my other examples, except for my join statement and my using keyword. So my join keyword is going to join orders O using customer ID, and I'm going to join that with my customers table. So my customers table, again, a select statement always has to have a select and a from, and then the keyword join, and then the keyword using. And then the using has to have the common column name in parentheses. So I've pasted it into my SQL. I'm going to get rid of my last query. And you can see all three of these statements. All three of these select statements do the exact same thing. So I'm going to go and I'm going to run this one. I'm going to put some indentations there so it's easier to read. And if I run this, I should come up with the 47 records. This took a little bit longer. I don't think it has anything to do with the efficiency of the query. It just probably is what else is going on the server. Exact same thing. This one's using join using. This one is a where, and this one is a join on. Again, you're going to get comfortable with one versus the other. The join using is the least amount of typing that you have. The least amount of typing typically means the less amount of times that you're going to go through and you're going to make a typing mistake. So I always go for some of the options that have the least amount of typing. So now we're back to the same scenario that I want you to try for yourself. Using the accounts payable schema, create a report to display all the vendor contacts by vendor name sorted alphabetically. In this case, you're going to use the join on, and you're going to find the field in common between the two, and it has to be the exact same name. So go ahead and take a moment, pause this, take a moment to go ahead and do that. All right, welcome back. You should have come up with a SQL statement similar to this. Again, your from table and your join table, there's no specific order in this case. And you have your using keyword. The field that they have in common or the column that they have in common is vendor ID. And then we're just going to, again, order it by 1, which is my first value in my select statement. So in the join using, you actually had to type in the column name. The natural join will go and it will identify it for itself. So for example, you have the exact same select clause, the exact same from clause, but in this case, we're going to use a natural join on order ID. It knows that it has a value in common between these two, and it will automatically go and it will link those tables together. So let's go ahead and go over to SQL Developer. So we'll go ahead and paste in our statement. We have our select and from exact same that we've seen above. The difference now is our natural join, which will go and we'll look at our tables, customer and orders, find something that they have in common. What they have in common is customer ID. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to order it all by customer last name. Again, the exact same amount of rows. If we look at it, we should know it by now, where we have old Samuel down here who's been busy. We have Derek who's only ordered 1. Same exact data that we have. So we have in here, we have 4 different ways to get to the same data set, the data result. Where is old-fashioned or traditional? Any of the joins are more common. The natural join is the most efficient out of all 3, meaning the most efficient to go and to troubleshoot, the most efficient to maintain, versus the join using, the join on. However, the join on or the join using allows you to go and see the value that it is a primary key in one table and a foreign key in another table. So you're going to come and you're going to become very comfortable with 1 out of these 4 to go and to complete an inner join. All right, so using the natural join, I want you to go and I want you to update your SQL statement using a natural join to display the vendor contacts by name and alphabetically, and you're going to use the vendor contacts and the vendor table to get this information. So pause this and go ahead and update your SQL statement. And then you should come up with a SQL statement, something like this. You're going to select the vendor name and the last name from your vendor table and your vendor contact table. You're going to do a natural join, and you're going to order them by your first column or your vendor name. So again, you've gone through 4 inner joins. So now I want you to complete the practice exercises for Chapter 4, Part 1. Don't do anything at the end of the chapter. You need the information for Part 2 before you do those exercises. If you have questions on this, please contact me, email, discussion board, come see me during my office hours. Thank you so much and have a great day.